Dr. Dixon earned his PhD in molecular and cellular biology from Oregon State University. And he also has an affiliation with the Linus Pauling Institute. Now I'm going to read some of these things because it's a lot of words for me. He's going to dummy down a lot of this tonight, but his research has focused on underlying the biochemical mechanisms of the aging process. Now, who in the world wants to age? None of us, but we're not going to get out of here without it, right? But what if you knew how to flip the switches of your body so that you could age better and age well? That's what I'm about. I don't know about you, but that's what I'm about. Now, Dr. Dixon has authored very many scientific peer-reviewed manuscripts on certain things such as antioxidants, cancers, gene regulation, exercise, sports nutrition. He is passionate about nutrition. He has been in the nutritional industry for over 12 years. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Brian Dixon. We are so honored. This is a very rare occurrence to have the Chief Science Officer of our company on a Zoom presentation with us tonight to just really help you understand something that maybe you didn't know about. So I invite you to be open tonight to learn about incredible products, incredible science, and also possibly an opportunity that might speak to you or someone that you know about. So Dr. Dixon, thank you so much for being on. And in a moment, after you're finished, Carrie Williams will be talking. So I'll be introducing that beautiful gal who's one of the top leaders of LifeVantage as well. And she was my yoga student that introduced this to me and changed my life forever. So Dr. Dixon, take it away. Thank you so much.
Oh, Marisa, thank you so much. Carrie, thank you so much for having me on tonight. And, you know, it's absolutely my pleasure to talk to you about what is, I think, the current state of the art of the nutritional industry. And so what I'm going to talk about and how I want to frame kind of this whole conversation is around disruptive innovation in nutrition and really what is going on. But let's just start really briefly with what is disruptive innovation. And disruptive innovation is this thing that gets created that creates an entirely new market. And eventually it will disrupt an existing market, and it can even disrupt incredibly well-established companies if that technology is disruptive enough. I mean, think about what we've seen going on in recent years with a number of just iconic American companies that have closed down because they were so slow to innovate and they stuck in their own ways. They were stuck in their own ways and didn't keep up with the times. So, you know, just some examples that you may or may not be aware of, but think about where phones were just even 100 years ago. And then that shifted into what we have now in terms of cell phones. I don't think there's many of us on this call that still drive a horse and buggy. So think about what the automobile did to the horse and buggy industry. You know, Henry Ford gets all of the credit for the automobile, but he didn't actually invent the automobile. He just was instrumental in facilitating the process, right? The manufacturing process that could make cars affordable to everybody. Another crazy innovation is the internet. I don't know how many of you might have grown up with encyclopedias on your desk. I mean, if you really remember, there were salesmen that would go door to door and sell these really high-end encyclopedias. Growing up, we had a set, and anytime we needed to look something up, we'd have to go to the encyclopedia. But now where do we go? We go to the internet, we go to Wikipedia, wherever it might be. I mean, in the hands, right, of our cell phones, we literally hold the whole sum of human knowledge in these amazing little devices. Another disruptive innovation was the digital photography. You know, there's a crazy story about Kodak and how they were approached in the 1970s with this technology for digital photography. But do you know what they said? They said, nope, that's going to disrupt our core film business. So they passed on it. And because of that decision, Kodak no longer exists as we know it today. I showed you that old brick cell phone, but think about how far cell phones have come. I mean, when the iPhone was first introduced, it was an incredibly disruptive technology. I went back and recently watched the Steve Jobs presentation when he launched the iPhone. He had to say it was an iPod, a phone, an internet browser 6 different times before people realized exactly what he was talking about, that all of that technology was now built into this thing that you could carry around everywhere and have literally full access to anywhere in the world that you wanted. Some more disruptive technologies. I mean, think about what the gig economy has done. This ability for entrepreneurs to leverage, maybe some asset that they have, like a car, or maybe an extra room in their home. So think about what Uber and Lyft have done to the taxi industry, or think about what Airbnb or VRBO has done for the hotel industry. I mean, these are incredibly disruptive innovations. And now a lot of people working from home, they just want to be able to do it from their cell phones. And it's possible with this gig economy. Think about how we're meeting tonight. Again, I'm old enough where we used to have to give presentations with old slides that you'd have to put in these carousels, and then they would project up onto the screen. And if you think it's hard to get a PowerPoint or keynote presentation ready today, think of how hard it was back then when you had to organize all your slides in the right order. And if you got one out of order, it threw everything out of whack. Now everything's digital. Projectors are digital. We can connect over these digital platforms. It's just been a wonderful innovation. Now, what about nutrition? Has there been a lot of disruptive innovation in nutrition? Well, I want to make the argument that until very recently, there has been very little, if no, innovation in the nutritional space. So just to throw up a couple examples of when the last 3 essential vitamins were discovered, vitamin K was discovered in 1939. Folate was discovered in 1941, and the last essential vitamin to be discovered was vitamin B12 in 1948. So here we are. We've known for the last 70 to 80 years everything the human body has needed to function. So you can argue for that last 70 or 80 years, there's literally been no innovation in human nutrition. But what if there was something that was disruptive in this nutritional space? Well, that innovation is what Marisa referred to as nutrigenomics. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to couch this in kind of what I hope to be a fun story. I promise we're not going to get too scientific. I'm not going to throw a whole bunch of big words at you. But let me introduce you to this whole concept of nutrigenomics if you're not familiar. So nutrigenomics, very simply put, is nutrition that's working through this thing that's called cell signaling, which is nothing more than the cell's communication network that ultimately has some effect on the cell. And that's usually going into the nucleus of the cell where our DNA and our genes live, and actually flipping switches to activate very, very important and essential genes. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about nutrigenomics. I'm going to describe what cell signaling is, and then how we can actually utilize nutrients to activate our genes. So before I get to the nitty gritty of it, let me start by asking you all this question. And that is, do you need a brain to be intelligent? So think about that. Humans consider themselves to be at the top of the intellectual hierarchy. But I want to make the point that there's a lot of intelligent behavior happening in organisms that don't even have a brain, or maybe just have a primitive type of brain. If we go and look at the definition of intelligence, I find this incredibly interesting. The first half of the definition is the ability to learn or understand things. And I think this is what we normally associate intelligence with, right? That's that kid in school that's really book smart, gets straight A's. But it's the second half of this definition that I find quite intriguing. And it's the ability to deal with new or difficult situations. So keep that last half of that definition in the back of your minds for just a minute. So do you need a brain to be intelligent? The most successful organisms on the face of this earth are bacteria, not just in number, but in sheer mass. If you put all the bacteria on one side of a scale and all the humans on another side of the scale, the bacteria would far outweigh humans. So how can a single-celled organism that clearly doesn't have a brain really interact with its environment to find food, to grow, divide, whatever it's doing? Think about plants. Again, plants clearly don't have a brain, but if I put a seed into the ground, how do those roots know to grow down and the leaves know to grow up? Ants, right? Now we're getting into some organisms that have a very primitive brain at best. But how do ants know to follow these trails, right? To find food, to find water? How does the ant nest actually work and function, right? It's all being coordinated somehow. But how is that happening in an organism with such a primitive brain? How do fish know how to school? How do dogs like instinctively know how to fetch? Or think about most animals on the face of this earth. When they're born, just minutes, if not hours after they're born into this world, they have the ability to get up and walk around. You know, it takes us on the order of about a year to make that happen. So our horses, for example, more intelligent than we are. And then just think about some of the things that are happening in our own bodies and that are happening maybe outside of these massive 3-pound organ that's sitting on top of our shoulders. Well, think about cutting your finger, right? Does that cut know how to heal itself? Or are you sitting there thinking, heal, heal, heal? No, right? It's just happening. Or think about yourselves sitting there, wherever in the world you might be tonight or this morning. But think about all the blood running through your blood vessels, the nerves going up and down your nervous system. Think about like your breathing, your digestion, right? Are you thinking about all of this, or is it just happening? Right? If you were fortunate enough to get a workout in today, are you thinking about your bones being remodeled to build back even stronger, or those muscles that you might have used? Or are these things just happening, and are they happening well outside of our very intellectual brains? So let me ask you that question again. Do we actually need a brain to be intelligent? And I think the answer is clearly no. There's a lot of intelligent behavior that happens in the world around us that doesn't involve our huge brains. So if I were to ask you, what did everything have in common? What would you call that? Would you call it luck? Would you call it skill? Adaptation, I think, is getting a little bit closer. I said the actual word a little bit earlier, but if you were going to ask me, I would call this instinct, right? Isn't this usually how we describe these things? These organisms just know how to do these different things. But how do they know how to do those things? So if you were also to ask me, okay, where is this instinct living inside of us? I would say that that instinct is living inside of our DNA and genes. And so just to clear up a little bit of terminology, if I were to reach into the nucleus of one of your cells and pull it out and then get inside of the nucleus and pull out this massive molecule that we call DNA, it would be 6 to 9 feet long, right? So right around 2 meters long. It would stretch out across my table here. It's this massive molecule that's just wound back up on itself. And then within that long molecule, it's broken down into very finite segments. And it's those segments that we call genes. And so DNA or genes, or however you want to refer to it, is really nothing more than information for our cells to do stuff. And an analogy I like to use is one of a blueprint. So DNA is exactly like a blueprint. So I think you would all agree with me that there is a ton of information on this blueprint. But if I were to ask you the question, could this blueprint actually build this house? I think the answer is obviously no, right? A piece of paper can't swing a hammer or pour cement. it takes a very skilled worker to read these blueprints and then also direct a team of very skilled workers to actually build the house. So DNA, our genes, is just nothing more than the instructions for our cells to build stuff. Okay. So if that's where the information's living, then there must be people also doing the work. Okay. So who or what might be the workers inside of the cell? The answer is proteins. So most of those genes inside of our DNA are the instructions for our cells to make proteins, or another word we can use is enzymes. And in my mind, enzymes are like these little machines that are actually doing the work inside of the cell. Okay, so now we know where the information is. We know who the workers are inside of the cell, but who is actually the boss? Who is directing those workers? And the answer to that is it's cell signaling. And the best way to say it is it's coordinated cellular signaling. So there's this communication network that lives inside of all of our cells, which is really directing everybody what to do. And really, this cell signaling is nothing more than going from A to B to C to D, and then something happens inside of the cell. We'll work through this slowly. No, I'm kidding. I purposely put this graph in here to illustrate exactly how complex these cell signaling networks are inside of us. And this is just one example of one cell signaling network that's living inside of our cells. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of these different communication networks going on inside of our cells at any one time. But again, it's just nothing more than going from A to B to C to D, and then something happens. Okay, so now we know where the information is. We know who the workers are. We know who the boss is in cell signaling, but what's initiating cellular signaling? What kicks it all off? And the answer is it's these things called receptors. So you can think of these receptors as being like little sensing molecules that live either on the outside of our cell membranes or can even be floating around inside of the cell. They're just sitting there waiting for the right signal to come along to activate these cell signaling pathways. And for me, a simple way I like to think about these receptors is that they're like a lock and key. So the receptor would be like the lock, and when the right signal or the right key can activate that lock, it opens up, and then it'll open up whatever world you're looking to get into. So this is exactly what's going on back in this complicated graphic, right? You can even see at the top of it, it says receptors. And then those little gray circles and triangles would actually be like those keys or those signaling molecules that are activating receptors that are kicking off these different cell signaling pathways. Another analogy I like is these cell signaling pathways are like a chain of dominoes. So, right, you can knock over one domino and you knock over all the subsequent dominoes. And then at the end, usually there's a big grand finale. So something happens at the end, right? So let me show you a little video. But before I hit play, can you actually see all of the different aspects of cellular signaling in this video? So where would that receptor be? The receptor would be that first domino. Okay, where would that signaling molecule or the key be? It would be that individual's finger, right? And then where is the actual cell signaling pathway? It would be all of those subsequent dominoes, right? So watch, one tiny little input is ultimately going to knock over all of those other dominoes, and then bang, something happens. And if you think about it, one domino was responsible for knocking over all of those other dominoes. So this is also the power of cell signaling. there can be signal amplification that can occur within the cell. So what do I mean by that? And maybe I can give you a couple real world examples of what that might be. So if you can, in your mind's eye, picture a bodybuilder, right? So it's just carrying around too much muscle for his own good, okay? They can inject a little bit of testosterone and put on these unphysiological amounts of muscle. So they're completely remodeling their muscle physiology by just having these tiny little inputs. Or ladies, think about birth control pills. We can give you just a tiny little birth control pill and completely remodel your reproductive physiology. So this is really the power of cell signaling, that we can get this signal amplification that can occur. Tiny inputs can have massive consequences to the cell. So here's another kind of domino example. And here we're going to start with the domino that just weighs a fraction of an ounce or a fraction of a gram. It's going to be knocked over, and then it's going to knock over that last domino that weighs around 100 pounds or about 50 kilos. This is exactly what's happening with these cell signaling pathways and this signal amplification. So tiny inputs can have massive consequences to the cell. And this is what's coordinating cellular function. Okay, so let me ask you another question. What is the purpose of these cell signaling pathways? What's their reason? Why are they there? Why do they need this extensive communication network? And the answer is, those cell signaling pathways are there for the cell to react and respond to both their internal and external environment. Okay? Think back to that definition of intelligence, the ability to react and respond to difficult situations. So this is exactly where this cellular intelligence or this instinct is coming from, right? This is what's coordinating all of that smartness that's going on inside of our cells and in the world around us. And it literally doesn't matter which one of these hundreds or thousands of different cell signaling pathways I show you, they all work exactly the same way. A, then B, then C, then D, and then something happens, okay? So the company that I'm proud to represent, LifeVantage, was founded in 2003. And if you remember, that was just about the time that the human genome had been fully sequenced. Not long after sequencing that human genome, this notion of nutrigenomics came about. This notion that nutrients, not just signals from that internal or external environment, but actually nutrients can activate these genes inside of our bodies. And for me, this is the seminal paper that really got across this notion of nutrigenomics. Okay, so I know there's a lot of big words on here, but I'll break it down really quickly. So I think we've probably all heard that eating chocolate is beneficial for your health, right? And it's especially that dark, kind of nasty, bitter tasting chocolate that's so good for our health. And it's especially good for our cardiovascular health. So the crux behind this paper was they wanted to understand, why is chocolate so healthy, especially for cardiovascular health? So they started mining all the different nutrients that were found in high concentration cocoa. And to their surprise, what they came to find is that a lot of those nutrients that were found in chocolate were actually present in incredibly low concentrations. More than that, when people consumed these nutrients, they were very poorly absorbed. And even more than that, not only were they present in low concentrations, very poorly absorbed, but they were very rapidly metabolized and excreted from our bodies. So the scientists were scratching their heads thinking, well, how can any of these compounds possibly have these huge health benefits? Well, they were able to isolate one particular compound, and if you're interested, it's called epicatechin. So they went on to study epicatechin and how these compounds from chocolate could have these huge health benefits. And a very long scientific study short, what they found is that these compounds from chocolate don't actually make it directly into the cell, and that they were in effect binding to receptors and activating these intracellular cell signaling networks. They went on to do some more studies, and they were able to identify the specific genes that were affected by these compounds of chocolate that are directly related and responsible for the cardiovascular health benefits that they saw. So again, very small inputs can have massive consequences and have massive health benefit to our own cells and our own bodies. Okay, so this is exactly nutrigenomics. It's using targeted key nutrients, and quite often they need to be in the right ratios that will activate these cell signaling pathways to turn on genes. And what is so interesting about these genes is they have names like survival genes or anti-stress genes or longevity genes. So you can tell just right from their names how important they must be to our overall health. And this is exactly the crux of our entire product line at LifeVantage, is that we are using targeted key nutrients to activate these cell signaling pathways, and we have them across our product portfolio, not just our hair care or our skin care, not just in our brain health product we call Axio, not just in our gut health products, not just in the products that we also make available for our best friends, our dogs and canines, but it is really what started this company, and that is the Protandim family of products. This really is our flagship, and these products are designed to activate these very important genes as they relate to antioxidant protection or helping support our body's own natural detoxification defenses, mitochondrial health. And then our latest addition to the Protandim family of product is a product that's designed to help us just feel more vitalized through our day. And we call it Protandim NAD Synergizer. So again, using these right combinations of nutrients in the right ratios, we can leverage this inherent aspect of our cells to activate these cell signaling pathways and activate these very important health promoting genes that we have inherent in every single one of our genes. And so this is exactly how LifeVantage is disrupting in this nutritional space. And we have been, since the beginning, the world leader in this whole notion of nutrigenomics, and why I am also so proud to represent this company. So with that, I'll turn it back over to one of you ladies.
Dr. Dixon, thank you so much. That was fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and help and kind of that was, I love how you talk all about the science and create those analogies, you know, and what he's talking about is the activation of our cells. And and now my PowerPoint is not going to do it. So I have to stop share and try it again. Okay, hang on just a minute. All right, so we are looking at activation, and really Dr. Dixon is going to help share a little bit about what this all is. So we're talking about oxidative stress, the wear and tear of the body, and that with nutrigenomics, we're able to, if you have never heard of the words oxidative stress, we all have it if we breathe, right? And it's the wear and tear of our cells caused by aging, caused by the environment and what's going on. So what makes, you know, what happens when people experience oxidative stress?
Yeah, it's interesting, and maybe I'll couch the conversation in maybe what I know best, and that's the aging process. You know, there are so many different theories of aging out there. There's literally hundreds of different theories, but probably the most well-studied theory of aging that's out there is this notion of the oxidative stress theory of aging. And, you know, we can throw a couple more analogies out there, but it's really analogous to a car sitting in a field kind of rusting away, or when you cut open an apple and it turns brown. That's oxidation. And so all the things you have up there on the screen are all things that can lead to this notion of oxidative stress. And it's these nasty little chemicals that are just attacking our cell structures, and eventually it starts to literally rust ourselves from the inside out. And what is so interesting about this oxidative stress theory of aging is it is intervenable, and it's intervenable through this protein known as NRF2. And NRF2, it turns out, perfect timing. NRF2, it turns out, is one of those molecules in the cell signaling pathway that when it gets activated, that little protein goes into the nucleus of our cells and starts flipping the switches on a number, and we're talking hundreds, somewhere between 200 to 300 different antioxidant and detoxification genes. So when we're using the right input or the right nutrients or the right signaling molecules, we know we can elicit all of those health benefits that you see there on the right. And so we're leveraging not just this genomic research that's happened throughout the years, but also a lot of the research that's been at the forefront in the aging community for quite a while. And we know that if we can reduce oxidative stress, good things happen.
And it's 40% in 30 days on average, and up to 70% after continued use. And so what is it? It's something like one Protandim. I've been taking this little yellow pill for 8.5 years. And one of these helps your own body activate its own production of anti-aging enzymes to eliminate 1 million free radicals.
Yeah, it's very interesting. There are two types of antioxidants. There's dietary antioxidants, so the things we're getting from hopefully the healthy food that we're eating or a nutritional supplement. And those, you know, they work. They do okay, but they're probably nowhere near as efficient as what our bodies have been able to capture over the thousands of years that we've been on the face of this earth. So the reason that the antioxidants that we have in our bodies are working so much differently than the antioxidants we're getting from our diet is once it gets consumed, right? Once this antioxidant is basically detoxifying the actual oxidant or that nasty molecule we don't want around the cell, it's consumed up and it can no longer work in its function. So when we have things that are activating NRF2 and we're turning on these enzymes that detoxify those same molecules, that enzyme can work repeatedly, and they call it redox cycling. So it can go between oxidized and reduced and oxidized and reduced. And that cycle can repeat millions, if not billions of times with just one enzyme inside of our cells.
1 to 1 or 1 million to 1, right?
Right.
Oh my gosh, that's phenomenal. And so what about the science that is behind this little yellow pill?
Again, just another reason I'm so proud to represent this company. This one product alone, and we're talking not just the individual ingredients, but actually on the finished product, has been studied by, you can see all the names that are on the screen, but there are currently 31 different research articles on Protandim NRF2 Synergizer.
And one of those studies, I mean, you've got American Heart Association, you have Harvard, National Institute on Aging was a longevity study, right? Like, what does that say?
Well, we got to be careful, but what we can say is that they did find an extension in lifespan in mice, but we like to promote it as healthy longevity. Got
it. I understand that very much. Thank you so much. And this one blows me away, is that people need to do the research on what NRF2 activation is, because Protandim is the world's first NRF2 activator, natural, and the most potent, backed by clinical peer-reviewed research. And look at what Washington State University is saying just about NRF2.
Yeah, you know, during my graduate work, when we were studying the oxidative theory of aging, NRF2 was the key molecule that we were trying to activate, and with various nutritional interventions. It's at this crossroads of antioxidant protection and helping upregulate detoxification mechanisms.
Pretty amazing. So that's the first theory of aging. The second theory of aging is about our mitochondria, the mighty mitochondria. And I used to think we only had one because I had to color it in school, but that's not the case, is it?
Yeah, mitochondria are incredibly interesting, and again, a lot of experience, especially during my graduate work on studying the mitochondria. If you're not familiar with the mitochondria, these are the powerhouses inside of our cells. Our cells have to generate an incredible amount of energy every single day just to live and breathe. We basically, our cells use this compound called ATP as its energy currency. You might remember it from your old high school classes. But ATP is this energy currency that's really driving the work that's happening inside of the cell. And just to put into perspective, our mitochondria are producing around our body weight. If we're just sitting down doing nothing, our mitochondria are generating our body weight every single day in this molecule ATP. So there's a tremendous amount of flux that goes through there. This is also where the majority of our energy metabolism is occurring, right? So literally the food that we eat ultimately ends up going to the mitochondria. And the mitochondria are just the most amazingly complex thing. They literally are little nuclear reactors inside of our cell. And so what's happening is the food's coming into the mitochondria, and what it's doing is slowly breaking the bonds, the chemical bonds that's found in the food. And as those bonds are being broken, there's energy that's released, and quite often electrons are given off. And so when those electrons are given off, the mitochondria have the ability to capture that electron and harness the potential energy that's inside of that electron to ultimately generate ATP. And that system works pretty good, but it's not perfect. It's been estimated that especially as we get older, somewhere between 1 to 2% of the oxygen that we breathe gets converted into free radicals and other oxidants. And so why is that a problem? Well, those oxidants, I mentioned that they can actually go on and damage cellular structures. So obviously, if they're being generated in the mitochondria, the thing that's in the closest proximity is the mitochondria itself. So that mitochondria kind of takes the brunt of those electrons that are causing all the havoc in those free radicals and other oxidants. So over time, the function of the mitochondria gets even worse, and you get this vicious downward spiral of decreased efficiency and an increase in free radicals and oxidants. The mitochondria are often referred to as the Achilles heel of the cell, and many researchers believe that this is where the aging process begins. And you heard me talking about free radicals and other oxidants. You can see how the mitochondrial theory of aging and the free radical or oxidative stress theory of aging really do overlap. And so what we want to try to do is keep the mitochondria as healthy as possible. And that was exactly the genesis for our product Protandim NRF1 Synergizer. It's delivering nutrients that have been shown to help with mitochondrial health and functioning, but it's also designed to activate this key pathway around the mitochondria known as NRF1. And what NRF1 is ultimately responsible for is helping the mitochondria turn over. So what we want to do is remove those old mitochondria and replace them with young, healthy ones. And so again, by targeting the specific switch inside of the cell that we want to target, in this case, the NRF1 pathway with the key nutrients or the inputs that you see there, we know we can support mitochondrial health, and we can yield all of those health benefits that you see there on the right of your screen.
So that's a 1-2 punch, NRF1 and NRF2. And now the third theory of aging, which is really about optimizing the whole cell, is sirtuin activity. And just let's be real quick and simple, because this could get really bogged down, but we're not going to do that.
Yeah, for sure. There's just such a wonderful research story about how these proteins called the sirtuins were found. But for time, I'll spare us all that story. But these sirtuins have been linked to healthy longevity, something called autophagy, which is kind of clean up within the cell. So as these molecules are becoming damaged, we basically kind of sweep them under the rug. And so by upregulating these sirtuins, we can help the cell clean itself, but we can also facilitate a number of health benefits that are there. And so crux to that sirtuin activity is this molecule called NAD. And NAD is normally living in the mitochondria, but when we can either increase the levels or we put ourselves on an incredibly restricted diet, these NAD levels increase, activating these enzymes called the sirtuins, and we can again elicit all of those health benefits that you see on the right.
That's amazing. So basically we are optimizing our cellular health, you guys, to feel better, flipping those switches to feel better and do more. And when you take all three of those together, the Protandim NRF2 to reduce oxidative stress, the Protandim NRF1 to boost mitochondria, and the NAD to really clean it up and activate these sirtuins, so to speak, then you really have a supercharge of each one of these different pathways, right? And that's pretty
Absolutely.
Phenomenal.
Absolutely. This
Wow.
is, I'm proud to look at this graph. This was the first research study I embarked on at my time at LifeVantage. We know individually the products work amazingly, but when you utilize them together, the synergy that we get, and we get as much as a 1900% synergistic effect when all three of these products are utilized together. It's absolutely an incredible response. So these products work great individually, but they work even better when utilized together.
Oh my goodness. So I know that I'm taking them forever. Thank you very much. And oh my gosh, Dr. Dixon, I could listen to you all day. So that is our Protandim Tri-Synergizer for about $5 a day. You can take these. They're pretty amazing. That's the Tri-Synergizer, our product pillars for this company. We do have a few more products. You can get them in packets or you can get them in bottles. And the other product that we have basically NRF2 activation. And I won't get into the details on each and every one of them, but just know that NRF2 is in our skin care, you guys, in our hair care, and our products are super clean. Our probiotic is revolutionary. Omegas are so important. We have a healthy lifestyle weight management product line that includes a fat burner and a prebiotic and a beautiful clean whey protein. We have Pet Tandem for dogs. That's NRF2 for dogs, because people were giving the human pill to dogs, horses, cats, sheep, goats, you name it. And they were, I mean, animals don't know placebo, so try that. But what I would love for you, and I love our omega too, to get those cells juicy and talking to each other, great for our brain, great for our heart, our skin, all of those things. And the Vitality Stack, which is part of our Protandim family product line. We have different stacks that people can pick and choose and get in where it fits in as a customer. But I want you to just share real quick a little bit about Axio, because Axio is so important for people and for brain focus. And I'll tell you what, I'm staying focused tonight because I'm drinking my Axio.
Good for you. Yeah, Axio is our brain health product, or maybe you've heard them referred to as nootropics. The crux behind this product is it's just designed to help support our brain health. And you know, it's ironic that many of us don't think about our brain and the brain health, but it's an organ or tissue, just like any other of our organs or tissues in our body. And we need to support it. But listen to these facts really quick. So our brain only comprises about 3% of our body weight, but it also is consuming 20% of all of our resources. So oxygen, calories, nutrient. So the demand that's going on inside of the brain is unbelievable. And so we need to support our brain health. And that's exactly the thought process that went into Axio. We wanted to deliver nutrients that help support overall brain function. And it's not one of these unhealthy energy drinks that's out there. Very few calories, right around 15 calories per serving, little bit of fuel in there for the brain, but then a number of nutrients that we know support brain health.
It's part of my hygiene of life, I'll tell you. Thank you, Dr. Dixon.